The solo cash cup just happened and was won by Marco, who in game 4 got into the second moving zone and then saw that height was completely free. Marco proceeded to crank up and take the height with ease. Marco showed why it is so important to always be aware of height, as there's often no one on it, making it extremely free to take. But let's move off height and onto the low ground, where we see Malibuca make a deep tarp into the first moving, where then he sits back on the very edge of the first moving. This allows him to both find a refresh on a weak player who's just coming out of the zone, but it also allows him to get to the front side of second moving if the zone had pulled max distance because he had already established a tarp. Zone ended up playing back on his old tarp, so this play became useless, but it was still a great idea. But do you know what is also a great idea? Well, if you said holding an angle, you would be right. Notice how in this clip, Marine notices Thomas and tracks him through the builds, and when Thomas comes out, Marine's crosshair is already in position to hit a huge shot, and this nets him an easy kill. To find more easy kills, though, we're going to have to head over to the NA East region, where Acorn throughout the endgame constantly looked to disconnect players to get huge beam. He did this first by editing out Cardi, almost killing him. Acorn then shot out hide and seek and almost picked up this kill as well. Then Acorn looked up at height and chopped out the height players' builds when they were deep in zone. This gave Acorn the kill as well as high ground that won him the game. Although chopping players out didn't result in Acorn getting a kill for the first 2 times, he still kept on trying, which resulted in him getting an easy height take and an easy win. But if we want to find some more wins, we need to go to some off-spawn wins, where Polarize starts off the fight onto Thomas with a huge beam. From here, Polarize closes the gap onto Thomas, but keeps a 1 tile distance between himself and Thomas to finish off the fight to make sure that Thomas can't hit a huge shot onto Polarize to win the fight for himself. Let's continue with off-spawn, going over to Shifty Shafts with Peterbot, who gets a big tag onto Deemer. Peterbot keeps the pressure on by showing his perfect understanding of his drop spot, sliding through the roofs to prevent Deemer from healing, which allowed Peter to quickly clean up this kill. If you thought Peterbot's kill was quick, Haiji's back-to-back kills in Game 6 were even quicker. Haiji actively looked to spray players who are already fighting, allowing himself to pick up 2 fast kills. To get more fast action, let's head over to West, where Kuel hears a player below him get cracked, and he sets up a perfect trap for his opponent to walk into. Unfortunately, his opponent stays in his box, so Kuel decides to put pressure on. Notice how safely Kuel pushes towards this box by covering all of his angles in brick, making it impossible for him to get sprayed. This delay prevents him from getting the kill, but he's still able to get the loot and mats to continue on with his game. Continuing on with Kuel's endgame, we see its excellent use of armored walls. As soon as Kuel is being sprayed, he immediately throws down an armored wall, and this saves him twice as the endgame continues on. These games have been cool and all, but what about winning a game with no movement on the first moving? To figure out this, let's look at how Pars won Game 6. Pars went into the first moving with 100 mats and no movement. Pars sprinted up the left side of the first moving, then slid down ramps in order to get a ton of speed while saving mats. When the second moving pulled, Pars instantly rotated up the dead side of the second moving, saving himself a ton of materials. Pars then finds a refresh onto a player by jumping in while the opponent had his pickaxe out. This refresh gave Pars a grappler, which got him into the second moving with a ton of mats, which he used to spray out and crank for high ground. From here, Pars tarped on the high ground until he got its surprise taken from him in the final moving, but this didn't deter Pars, who used his floppers to take back height and eventually win the game. We've watched a lot of games from the high ground, but what about the mid ground? Well, let's look at game 1 from Braids. Braids used his grappler to fly through the first moving and the first half of the second moving. Braids then looked to play out his match to the second moving to collect more and more placement points, as he did not need to force a refresh at this time. When the third moving pulls, Braids instantly starts to rotate to the third moving and elevates himself because of the hill present. Braids finds a player who's waiting a suspiciously long time on the backside of the zone. Braids capitalizes on this when the player goes out to grapple by having his crosshair ready for the kill. Braids then kills Pars while he's going for loot and drops onto the low ground in the final moving by being the first player to rotate. Braids hits some clutch shots to put himself in the final 1v1, which he unfortunately loses. Low ground is fun and all, but high ground wins tournaments, so let's look at how Marco took height in game 2. Marco used his mobility to get through the first moving, and then when the second moving comes around, he sneaks up onto Chapix and uses his auto to win an aim duel. This seems like a risky play, but the value you get from a win is so high that taking a risky play like this is oftentimes worth it. From here, Marco played very basic height fundamentals, playing 2 tiles off the second height, and when the final moving played up a mountain, Marco was set to win game 2, which he did with ease. Finally, let's take a look at how Kezix finds so many kills in endgame. Kezix makes a ton of space with his tarps, and as a result, a ton of players end up running past his edits, giving Kezix a ton of free kills and a bunch of opportunities for easy refreshes. This was 10 tips on the solo cash cup. Make sure to subscribe.